Today, we're mixing another of Schmincke's super granulating colors. We're looking at Urban Green. This is such a beautiful color. I was sent this one, and I don't have a tube or anything to replace it. Of course, most of my super granulating colors, I bought the set of pans. So once they're gone, unless I choose to replace them. But what if I can just learn to mix them? Do I actually need to replace them? That's what we're looking at today. We're going to take the Urban Green. This is such a gorgeous color. I'm going to show you the pigments it contains, and I'll let you know which ones I chose by which brand, and we're going to see if we can mix it. So here we have, and you saw I dipped in my water because super granulating colors will granulate so much more when they're in a nice wet wash. So grab a little bit more of that pigment and just drop it in here. See if we can't get a little bit of a gradient on this. And we have to kind of let it do its thing. Just tapping to get some of the extra pigment out of my brush. Just leave that alone now. When this sets, the colors definitely have some separation that happens, but there is our swatch of the actual original color that was created by Schmincke. This is made up of PY 159. I'm going to tell you something interesting about that, and I would love for your comments below. We also have our PB 36, our cobalt turquoise. If you remember last week, we used cobalt turquoise when we made a hue to represent the Sleeping Beauty turquoise genuine made by Daniel Smith. So if you missed that video, it is out on the channel. We're going to be using PB 36 again. And then it has PBK 11, which for Daniel Smith is Lunar Black. Some other companies will call it Mars Black. But for Daniel Smith, it is Lunar Black. I am already starting to see the separation where I can see the yellow popping up. It just glows in this mix, and it will just rise to the surface, and we will just see. I don't know if you can see it showing up there, but I've got some coming up right in here, and there's definitely a beautiful spot right there. You almost get this like neon yellow green, like a lime color that appears in that wash as they start to separate. Again, today I'm using my Bee Inspired watercolor paper. It is a cellulose paper that I have cut and created this little block out of. I use these blocks for my Adventures in Watercolor Land series that I'm doing for patrons and also for my mixes. Okay, let's take a look at each of these pigments. Now, PY 159, and this is where drop me a comment if you know. But PY 159 I can only find as a single pigment color from Schmincke. And this color is also in their super granulating series and is one of the few super granulating colors that is a single pigment. And this is from the Volcano series. And this is PY 159 Volcano Yellow. If we look, I'm going to grab some extra water here because this is a yellow that granulates and it is transparent and it is not really staining, but it is a yellow and it's hard to see the granulation in the yellows, but this one definitely adds granulation to the mix, and it is in a few of Schmincke's granulating mixes, but you can only get it from the Volcano Yellow. I don't know of another manufacturer that makes PY 159 as a single pigment color. If you do, please drop me a comment below because I would love to get my hands on some and check it out. This PY 159 is definitely a color that, as this runs out, I will be adding back into my collection. You can see the granulation that starts to happen already in this yellow. It's it's gorgeous yellow. Next up is PB36. Now, I showed you last week, I have PB36 in Daniel Smith, and I also have it in my Mission Gold for my Mission Gold Pure Pigment set. And this week, I just chose to use the one by Daniel Smith because it happened to be still be sitting on my desk. And when I practiced trying to create this mix, it worked. So that's why I'm using it. No other reason than the hue worked for what I needed. Remember, sometimes we get a pigment listed, but the hue can vary greatly from one manufacturer to the other. And I'm going to be doing, I think, a series where I'm comparing pigments to show you guys this stuff. If that's something you're interested in, please drop me a comment and let me know. I know other people have done it, but I have not done it. And I've been considering that, to where I will share with you like the different PBK11s that I have, or the different PB36s, and we'll see how they look and how they differ from brand to brand. So next up, I have my PBK11, which is my Lunar Black by Daniel Smith. And this, if you notice, I'm actually using a piece of a stick. So I have the Lunar Black in stick form, and I just cut a piece and stuck it in this palette. And that's what I use. Works exactly the same. It looks very much the same. I actually have a video where I compared the tube paint to the pre-poured pans by Daniel Smith and the stick paint. They all pretty much look the same. So definitely recommend getting stick form whenever it's available, because it's much more economical. All right, so the Lunar Black, otherwise known as Mars Black by some other manufacturers. I keep pushing my swatch out. I'm just going to add a little bit more water so that you can see how lovely this black likes to granulate. There it goes. Now, my Daniel Smith, I don't have them by Schmincke. So I don't have the PBK11 by Schmincke, and I don't have Schmincke's PB36. I don't know if they granulate more or less than these. Look at the beautiful granulation we're getting there. All three of those colors, gorgeous. I don't know if Schmincke's granulates less than these, because in my mixes, mine seems to be a little bit more granulating. I think that Schmincke's PBK11 is probably a little bit cloudier than Daniel Smith's PBK11, and I'll show you why in a minute when I look at the larger paper that has more of the mixes as I was testing how to mix this color. So we're going to go ahead and take my little dish here, and on the left side is where I've had the actual color by Schmincke. I'll link these dishes below. I have a few of these that I use in the studio, and they're great if I'm just working with a couple colors, or I need to mix up a bit of a color because, say, I'm working like monochromatic, something like that. So I like to see the original color when I'm working on creating the mix, so that I can show you guys how to do it correctly. And I will look at the original to see like how close do they visually, how close are they looking in the mix. Last week I showed you, I kept comparing my pan beside it as I was getting the hue correct. I understand if you don't have it to compare. You know, if you do have it to compare, why would you want to mix it? I don't know. Like, for example, with me, I want to know how to mix it so that when this is gone, maybe I don't need to purchase this again. And I can just mix from colors I already have. I also had a comment that suggested I was using artist and crafter math, whereas buy 3 pigments to mix one is going to be more expensive than just buying the one pigment. And that was in relation to the Sleeping Beauty Turquoise. Sleeping Beauty Turquoise is a more expensive pigment, but any of these Schmincke colors are going to run you about the same if you're here in the US, like I am, because these cost a lot more and they're very similar to what I would pay for the Sleeping Beauty turquoise genuine pigment from Daniel Smith. So why would I want to buy 3 to mix 1? Well, because I can use these 3 separately, or I can use them all together. Now I have 4, well, I have unlimited options because I can use it for more than just the 3 on their own and mixing one color. I can use these 2 together, or these 2 together, or these 2 together. You get the point. Also, I have 45 mLs of paint if I'm buying 3 tubes versus 15 mLs of paint if I were buying the 1 tube. And yes, I'm spending a little bit more money, but I'm getting a lot more paint. So, which way is better? Only you can answer that. Only you can answer which way is better for you. But for me, I already have these pigments in my collection, so once this is gone, I may choose to just go ahead and mix it for myself. The more I do that while I have it to compare, well, the better I'm going to get at mixing it. So let's look at, first off, look at the beautiful separation I had on that. See if I can get it to focus with my hand. There we go. Look at that from when I mixed it before. You can see the yellow coming through, some of that black separating. The only thing that doesn't return and separate where we see its hue is actually maybe a little bit like right in here. We're seeing the turquoise color coming through. But regardless, it separates out on your paper and it's beautiful. Now you see how this is dried. There's this like cloudy gray value that's very light that settles in the entire wash. Now, if we look up here at Daniel Smith's Lunar Black, it doesn't have the way that it settles where we see these lighter spaces. They're much lighter in value than what happens here. So our mix looks slightly different, but just slightly. And I think it's minimal enough for me that I don't mind. I also get a lot more granulation, which I like. So it's a matter of preference here with this one. But to start with, we're going to take our PY 159 and we're going to get this in here. And I should have cleaned this off first. Let me actually clean this so that you guys are going to be able to see just how much I'm putting in of each as we go. Also, this week, my colors are listed in the order that Schmincke has them on their label. So it's PY 159, PB 36, and then PBK 11. Last week, I listed them in the order I was adding them to my palette so that you could easily mix this on your own. This week, the order that they're listed is actually the order that I found easiest to put them into each other to get this mix correctly. So we're going to start with our yellow. Trying to get as much out of my brush as I can. There we go. And to that, we're adding our PB36, right? Our cobalt turquoise. So my brush is pretty full. Let me see how far up the belly of the brush that color is traveling. So I'm gonna get most of that out of my brush and let that sit right there. They're going to start to mix. I'm going to start to mix in the dish, and that's fine. And then, see, this is a very, I would say it's cooler. It's not completely cool. There's a little bit of warmth there you can see through from that yellow. We want to make sure that we maintain that. So we don't want to make this too cool. We're going to grab our Lunar Black. And I found that I definitely needed plenty of black. Like, don't be afraid to add the black in this one. Okay, so we have our Lunar Black. Now we're going to mix these all together. So when I look at that, I'm looking at this side in comparison to this side. Get most of that out because this has set while I was getting my pigments in here. This one has set. So they will start to separate. And I want to have a nice look at those. I can absolutely see the yellow try to separate out in this mix. And you can see on the right side, there it is. There's that cobalt turquoise. We can see some of the yellow along here. This is one that's going to want to separate on your palette really easily. I don't know. I don't know that that one is quite right yet. It looks pretty similar. Before I put it on here, I'm going to just give it a try. We will talk about this in a moment. Yeah, see, that looks like I have too much. It looks like I have too much of my black. I don't have enough of my other colors in there. I know, I just said, you don't have to worry about black. And then I say, oh, I have too much black. This will start to separate. But I know that as I do that, I need to see a little bit more green. I mean, it's almost there. Actually, as that separates, I'm immediately seeing the yellow. Can you guys see the yellow coming to the surface through here? I'm just kind of watching as they start to separate to see just how close I am. It's actually pretty close. That's actually very close already. Let's go ahead and swatch it on our card. Let's just leave it as it is. So here's our mix. Last time we got a very wet wash and we dropped in some more pigment. And you're going to see that this is definitely going to granulate a lot more than this did. I don't know. In looking at this wash, this might be, it might still be off, but we'll take a better look at it on the larger paper. I'm just going to leave it set, just like I did last time. I'm looking at where it gets lighter, and I'm just trying to duplicate that in this one so that we'll have something that looks similar when it's dry. Just going to let it be. Okay. So my original, my mix. There are my 3 pans of color and the original color. Let me just set this up here. It's getting some glare from the lights, but let's talk about this. Okay. How might I use this color? First off, because I get that question a lot. Like, okay, great, but how would you use the color? If I were painting trees, I would absolutely use this color to do some of the shadows. You see how this was just a very wet wash and I dropped some darker pigment in. If I was creating grasses and I needed a nice shadow color, I would use this for sure. So let's talk about what we have going on here. Here you see them all dry. All 3 of those are lovely granulating colors. This was my original color. This was my very first mix. I got close, but I had a bit too much yellow in that one. And if you thought, I just touched my hand in that, so that's not going to be accurate because I just smudged it. But if we look at, if you're on Discord, if you are a channel member or a patron and you are on Discord, this is actually the first one I shared in the Guess the Mix so that you guys might be able to see more of that yellow coming through, trying to help guess the pigments, because this definitely had a lot more yellow showing through than the original did. Later, I shared this one, which I thought was perfect, a perfect mix for it. But again, here's my original color. You see the mix? There's so much more granulating. I mean, this is a perfect example. Now here, I used the original in a much wetter wash. Look at the original on every one. See this dark edge? See the dark edge? That's the PBK 11 by Schmincke. It pushes out to that edge every time. In this mix where I came the closest, I got a little bit of it here in that wet wash, but nothing like the original. The original almost always gives that harder edge of that dark color in a wet wash. It also has, I say cloudier. You see the gray that shows up. So where we get granulation, when we see through that granulation, we're seeing this gray color. Where when we use the Daniel Smith's PBK 11 and we see through the granulation, here, it's not, the gray is different, right? That gray color that we see through, it's a bit lighter here versus here. Still, all in all, when we look at the mix in the original, I think we've got it. They look so very close. You drop me a comment and let me know, what do you guys think? They definitely look so very close. So look what we put down on the paper here. Look at that. PBK 11 is like pooling right there. This, so much more granulation than this. Now, if you're a fan of that, that's fantastic. I can absolutely see some of the yellow coming through here. Again, I said this might not have been perfect when we did it, but let's look at another wash of the color. And it could be that I have a lot, it's a lot more diluted in here because I'm seeing the PBK 11 really rise into the surface, and I don't quite think, I think I was right in the beginning. There was a little bit too much PBK 11. So I'm going to grab a little bit more of my PB 36 and I'm going to grab a little bit more of my PY 159 and I'm going to mix this in. Again, I'm looking at like the comparison here. Just grabbing a touch more. I'm not grabbing a lot more. Now I'm going to do it again. Just dipping my brush into my water. And that's just because I want these really wet washes so that it can granulate and, you know, separate. You don't have to do that. If you're not a fan of the granulation, let me just show you getting some of the excess out of my brush. Now, this is a lighter value. Okay, let that dry in relation to this. Let's grab our original here. Again, you see that's just a big old pool of color. It's very wet. We're going to compare these two and see if we have it better now. I'll show you why I said I didn't think this was right. We'll definitely be able to see it over here. There wasn't enough of the cobalt turquoise and the yellow. Like I was seeing some of the yellow, but see the black flakes that are all on the top? That is that PBK 11. And the original, you can see the yellow that shows up in there. So we're going to wait and compare these two. Just kind of moving that. You see it traveling through there. Kind of move it till that almost disappears, then let it lay flat and they'll just kind of separate out. If I wanted to keep it like graduated, I could have. Over here where it was less wet, you can see that granulation, you know, it doesn't happen so much. Let me tap my brush off, grab just a little bit of the original here, and we'll look at that underneath this one. Make sure I mix that up. Looks like it was a little separated still. There's not much left in that pan. or in that well. I'm just trying to get the value to be about the same as that one up there. There we go. So that we can see how they compare. I think we've got it pretty close. Again, you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. If we're doing this, as I said, I would use it like if I was painting trees for shadow. This just shows you like what my shadow colors would be. Let me grab, this just happens to be a core palette because that's what was sitting next to me. I'm going to grab a warmer green. I don't even know what these ones are to tell you the color. I'm just grabbing a warmer green. The color is irrelevant at this moment, right? And if I had a tree, oh, look at all those dark. That's pretty dark. It's pretty dark on its own. Let me just kind of move some of them around so we have just the lighter values there. But now let's say I want to make some shadows. This is definitely a much cooler green. It's going to kind of mix and mingle. And I don't know if that green that I picked, I don't even know which one that was. I don't have my swatch sheet done up for that palette because I'm in the process of changing it up. But you can see we get some very different values, and it definitely works for creating our shadows. You guys know I love my trees. I'm just going to put we're seeing the trunk through here, sure. Just a quick tree, just to show you different ways I would use this. I can tap some in on the trunk of my tree, right below where it meets my leaves to cast some shadow there. And I can bring it right down, add it right into my trunk. As it starts to dry, so I'm tapping very wet color in. It's going to move. I can build my values. If I was working with grasses, just grabbing another green. Very warm, isn't it? Again, it's much easier when I have my swatch card to look at. Just anchoring my tree to my ground. Right? I'll just pull up a few. I just took a dry brush and I'm just pulling up a few bits of grass. And I'll come back here, grabbing my mix, getting a lot of that excess out, tapping it on my sponge. Right? Add some shadow from my tree, maybe some shadows in my grass. Right, this is still wet, and this is wet into wet because my wash where I put the grass down was a little wet. I pushed a lot of water here. Probably get a bloom, but it's fine. Bring in more of the color from my tree. So you see, that's one way that I would use the urban green. Now I'm just pulling up some more grass shapes. I had some hard lines that I didn't want. I'm just pulling up through when they look like little grasses, little blades of grass. Just flicking with the tip of my brush through that paint. So for those who have asked, how would you use this color? Where would you use this color, or when? That's one way. What ways do you like to use urban green? Let me know. I would love to have you share that because, you know, that might help other people who are interested in the color but not quite sure how they would use it. So yet again, when we look at our mix, this is dried now. When we look at it wet on dry, they're very, very similar. This still has a bit more granulation than the original. This has a lot more granulation than the original. We can see some of that yellow popping out here. We can see a lot more of the yellow popping out through here. That's one of the reasons I like to use it in, say, like trees or foliage for shadow colors, because that yellow separates. And if it's a warm yellow or a yellow, this actually looks like a cooler yellow. But if it looks similar in your foliage, your greenery, and your landscapes, this can definitely kind of just blend right in, and that PB36 and the PBK11 offer wonderful darker values and shadows. It's just one way that you can use it. I'm curious to how you like to use it. But what do you think of this week's mix? We mixed the Urban Green by Schmincke. Did we get it? Okay, in this one, like I said in the beginning, no, there was too much black. See how much the black sat on top and just sat there. Now, if you enjoy that, then this is great. Add more black to your mix. Look at how you can see the green through that as the cobalt. See the cobalt turquoise? We can really see the cobalt turquoise down in here. But yet, we tip that we can also see that PBK11 really kind of shining through. It just lights up this color. I love this mix. So here's the original. It looks kind of flat. This looks like it's got so much more life to it. So I don't know. I'm a fan of the heavier granulation. Thought Schmincke's was super granulating. Our mix is super, super granulating. But look here. That was our original. Here was our mix. So it in a very, very wet wash will be, as you see here, more heavily granulating, even with the original. If we just put it into a medium wash of color where we have, you know, a wet wash on the paper, but not like a puddle of water, if you would, we get like this. If we're just going wet on dry, it's not even doing as much. And I could have gotten this darker. I absolutely could have gotten this darker. I didn't use that much pigment. I have more pigment on my finger, I think, than I do on my painting there. But I think we've got it. I think that worked. I started with the yellow, add in your cobalt turquoise, and then add in your black. If you're getting, test it. If you're getting too much black sitting on the surface, like I did here, bring in more of your cobalt turquoise and your volcano yellow. And you don't get so much of the black sitting on top, which you can see here. It doesn't separate. Here, the black in my mix did not separate like it did when we mixed it today. So you definitely can get that. Are you going to give this one a try? I hope you will. Is this one that you're excited to now be able to mix? And do you know of any other brand that has PY159 as a single pigment? I don't. I couldn't find one. It's only Schmincke. But the good news is that Schmincke Volcano Yellow is available, open stock. So you can get just one tube if you want to add this beautiful granulating yellow to your palette. You can use that in lots of mixes. There is also one other, for speaking of the volcano, there's one other. Volcano Red is a single pigment color by Schmincke. And the Volcano Red is PR108. It's a cadmium red. Those two together, this and the Volcano Red, mix together and make the Volcano Orange. So there's a lot you can use that for. And they use the PR108, that granulating cadmium red, in other mixes too throughout the super granulating line. But PY159 is in quite a few mixes in the super granulating line that require a yellow, because this is a granulating yellow and it's repeated various times throughout that collection. So if you're a fan of the super granulating colors by Schmincke and you're going to want to mix some of them, PY159 might be a good choice to add to your collection of pigments. A lot of the others, as I've been showing you, you can get from other brands, and you might already have them in your favorite brand. Everything will be linked in the description below. I hope you enjoyed this week's mix. I look forward to seeing you next week with another. I'm working on a viewer request. And until next time, my friends, keep mixing, keep creating, and I'll see you in a video real soon. Perhaps this one right here. Bye, guys.